So we need entrepreneurs that have that digital savviness in rural America. I believe so. Uh, uh, because everywhere I go, I see that the creativity is there everywhere. Innovation is there, maybe not in the sense that has been defined in the 20th century, right? For us here in the US, smart technology is, or smart city is one that designs and deploys an Internet of Things ecosystem. And as you know, the Internet of Things is practically a bunch of sensors, and you can, that stream connect to the cloud. So a smart city, based the way I understand it, is one that deploys an IoT with the specific objective of reducing cost and becoming more efficient, right? So there are studies that show that if you add a sensor to all the garbage cans in Barcelona, for example, that it's a real case situation. Because of the IoT, it gives the trash pickup routes are optimized, they're more efficient, so they cut, they save time, they cut costs, et cetera, et cetera. An intelligent community, the intelligent concept, again, as we understand it here in the US, is one where it is more holistic. It is more proactive in the sense that the smart component, that Internet of Things, that is a thing that an intelligent community would do. But it doesn't limit itself to that. It is one of the tools. It can also increase civic engagement. It can also create an entrepreneurial digital economy ecosystem in the community. It could incentivize telework. It really is a change in mindset that from a community-wide perspective that allows the community to transition and prosper in the digital age.
So, and I think there's an intersection then with technology in the sense that we are trying to leverage some of these kind of so-called smart technologies to be a more intelligent community.
Exactly. That's a perfect summary.
If we were to do a typical kind of a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, to, for example, the rural communities that we've been working with, how does this then apply to that challenge?
So the intelligent, it is a SWOT analysis actually. The intelligent community concept has 6 indicators that can serve as a roadmap. It will allow you to do a SWOT analysis. First one is broadband connectivity, right? Is your community well wired? Is it affordable? Et cetera, et cetera. Is it adequate, reliable, all that stuff? The second one is innovation, right? Are you plugging in these venture capitalists with these entrepreneurs and these kind of small co-working spaces in downtowns, whatever, all this stuff, this innovation part? Are you allowing innovation to flourish in your community with this digital kind of spin to it? That's what the innovation indicator looks at. Then you have knowledge workforce, right? That's the third indicator. That one kind of sees, okay, how about your talent, your human capital, lifelong learning, which is a buzzword right now in workforce development because it is becoming clear, Jeremy, that we won't get a degree and stay in a company for 30 years and so be it, right? Now it's a constant movement of training, and so that will require to totally readapt our workforce development mechanisms where it's no longer a welder only, that's it, right? Because then more technologies come into play, and so it's a constant learning. So that's why it's called either continuous learning or lifelong learning. Those are 2 buzzwords. So that an intelligent community understands that, and it can measure it, it can see where it is in that spectrum. That's the third indicator. The fourth indicator, it's advocacy, right? Are you telling your story? That kind of falls into your realm in communications. Are you communicating with your residents, with your citizens, right? And are you telling the story outside? Are you advocating for your community, right? Are you telling that you are indeed acting and behaving with a digital mindset? So it's this advocacy component. That's the fourth indicator. The fifth indicator is sustainability, right? Are you investing in renewables and and all these things? And then the sixth indicator to me, which is the most important one, is the digital equity, right? Are you assuring that everybody has a shot at this? Nobody's being left behind, all this. So when you take all these 6 indicators together, Jeremy, you come up with a SWOT analysis. You can see where your community is strong, where it is weak, where there is opportunities, and where there are threats, and to put it into that perspective. But more importantly, if your students have any knowledge of traditional economic development, Jeremy, these 6 indicators, 4 of them are typically already being used by economic developers, right? Which is the innovation, the knowledge workforce, advocacy, and sustainability. The other 2, though, broadband connectivity and digital equity, are very, very aligned to the digital age. The kicker, and I've seen it in my research and extension, is when you take all 6 together, Jeremy, you get a totally different picture or SWOT of the community.
The equity questions go to what we're trying to address in this construct of media entrepreneurship, because these are communication and business students who may have big ideas that they want to try to launch within some kind of a community context that requires that kind of broadband access, and at least must look at kind of the equity questions, right?
Correct. I think it applies digital equity as defined by intelligence, and I can send you at the end a link to the indicators, whatever. I have had to adapt them a little bit because of my work with rural communities, in the sense that a rural community, when you're speaking innovation, you're not talking about venture capitalists, and you're not talking about, in rural communities, that's just not now, not today, not gonna happen. So, but yes, that equity is really applicable in a lot of other areas for sure.
As people try to catch up technologically and from a community resource side, the technology race is ahead. How do we address that?
And that goes to the core of that lifelong process from the workforce development, but it also applies from the community level, right? Number one, you've got to realize that you will never stop learning. That's old school. It's gone. Because when you think you've got it, another technology and application comes up, and like you said, it seems like they're ahead. So you've got to be, as a community, not as an individual, as a worker, as a community, you've got to be willing to continuously learn. Okay, that's the best recipe we have up until now from the community economic development research side of things. How can a community adapt constantly? But it all boils down to that mindset, right, Jeremy? You don't have that. If you're still thinking in that 20th century, you're not going to get it. You're going to miss it, and you're going to be left behind, which is what I think helps tremendously with awareness, which is another component that's kind of subtle, right? It's there, and everybody assumes we're on the same page, Jeremy, but we may not be on the same page. So how to address that thinking of oh my God, I'm never going to catch up? More than likely you won't. And some colleagues of mine do not call it a digital divide anymore. They call it a digital continuum because of that reason, right? It's all about public policy, how you define the problem, right, or the issue. So definitely, it's got to be a mindset where you realize it's going to be a lifelong process, not only for the individual, but for the community, and that you've got to be willing to try new things constantly, right? Just absorb all these technologies as they come out.
So we've been using social media as a tool or a tactic within a larger campaign or strategy. What do you think needs to be done in terms of leveraging the most that we can out of media as a technology?
I think, and I'm not the expert at this is not my area, and you can correct me if I'm wrong or disagree, but I think social media is powerful because it allows real-time interaction, and it's a two-way communication, right? Something websites did not have. An email kind of can do that if you're glued to your screen and you're kind of responding right back and forth. So those two key things are, I believe, the contribution of social media. It may not be called that later on, but if we keep those two elements in place, I think that other platforms will emerge that I believe are going to be a little bit more efficient to engage and do. And it may end up becoming social media 2.0, whatever it is. I don't know if you agree or not, or if I'm totally wrong in how I'm perceiving it, but I do think that the media we are like a teenager right now, right? Kind of experimenting and all the issues we've seen with the elections and fake news. And we're kind of, whoa, this is very powerful, right? Whoa, oh, we can do this. And I think we're kind of like a teenager discovering ourselves. And I am very, very confident that as we mature as a society with this technology, things will improve. I hope and I think.
We now have some fairly hard data over the last decade or more showing us that in many small rural communities, the local newspaper is either gone or hanging on by a thread with no resources. In your view, can social media be a functional replacement, at least in part, for what that newspaper once provided to these communities?
Definitely. I think that technology is it will never ever replace, especially that close knit rural communities, that kind of face to face situation, which the newspaper didn't necessarily do either. But that mentality is going to take years for the rural community to kind of go, okay, newspapers are gone. Now we've got to start learning this other technology. I think you're exactly right. I think it will replace in part what newspapers have been doing, and hopefully social media will become a somewhere where you can really vet and get actual information out, right? Not all this stuff that we're discovering can happen. I think we're in that turmoil era now, but definitely, yeah. And the same is happening with banks, Jeremy. As algorithms replace I read a book that said algorithms don't have to be perfect, right? They just have to be better than the average human. And that by itself is a huge gain, right? And so the same thing is happening with banks. A third of rural communities, according to Wall Street Journal, don't have a local bank. And that's only the beginning, because when algorithms become a lot more efficient, your default rates go way down because the algorithm will know more about you. If you peel it back, the newspapers, social media, new media, banks, it's this mindset that the community needs to embrace. They've got to realize things are changing. They're changing quick. The revolution from ag to industry took 40, 50, 60 years. It gave time for society to kind of go, okay, wait a minute, what's going on? But this time it's moving a lot quicker. So it's kind of, again, that need to lifelong learning and adapting.
When we look at the listings for our students who are getting ready to graduate, public relations and social media managers are, everybody's looking for that person who can help them with this new technology.
Yep, I totally agree. And I think that's important. That rural communities have the expertise, right, to really truly leverage this technology and benefit from it. There are challenges, there are fears and that's okay. But we've got to make sure we address those. Otherwise, it's going to be a steeper learning curve for rural communities. And here's the kicker, though, I think, is that the social media really took off. Number one, because we are social creatures, period, right? That's how we evolved. That's how we survived. But I think that it really is, social media took off really because it has kind of an urban design to it. And let me explain what I'm trying to. So in rural communities, what your neighbor is doing, right? I mean, you've got that close-knit interaction. I believe that a distinct social media could appear or should appear that has that rural nature in focus, right? That rural dynamic. It exploded in with that urban feel to it, that urban need, right? What would social media look for a rural community, right? If we could go back to the drawing board and do it. I don't know if I'm making sense or not, but
I think that'd be a great student exercise to create that model.
Yeah, because you follow me on why I think social media is kind of more urban, tailored, more urban need type thing. I mean, the guy Zuckerberg was in Silicon Valley writing that thing, right? He already had this density that is so big that you need this virtual layer on top. And so it took off, right? But what about rural? How would that look for rural? How could we leverage for rural? And that's something I'm eager to, I know it's there, but I don't know what it would look like.
Yeah, and I think you're really talking about social intimacy, that people understand who their neighbors are at a different level. If they've been raised in a community, if their family has been in that community for generations, there's a layering there that you often do not see in kind of that, urban, almost mass society model.
Rural America is as creative and as innovative as urban. It's just, I think it's a different type, it's a different ecosystem, it's different. So these students, if they're going to go back to their communities and they are digital natives, right? I think that's a tremendous plus. We need them basically. They have this, that they were born, I'm assuming they're, sophomores, juniors, whatever. So they're more than likely digital natives. And so we need entrepreneurs that have that digital savviness in rural America. I believe so. Because everywhere I go, I see that the creativity is there everywhere. Innovation is there, maybe not in the sense that has been defined in the 20th century, right? And so I would just encourage your students to continue learning. And then comes the second point, on top of this entrepreneurship and them going back, if they do end up in a media PR, I think they will have a lot of responsibility on their shoulders once all this mess that we're going through now and have been going through, kind of when the dust settles. I think it's going to be on them. It's going to be on them to turn it around and make it really useful and powerful with the potential that it does have in this rural ambience.